story of desperate hope and deathly fear. Villages and towns in Punjab are tracking news from Mosul, more than 3,000 kilometers away. They're waiting for any word on 39 of their brethren. WION reports.
Celebrations in Mosul. Gloom in this Punjab village. Bright future on the horizon in Mosul. The past haunts the present in Punjab. Meet Anita from Hoshiarpur in the northern Indian state of Punjab. She says her husband Gurdeep went to Iraq in the hope of a bright future, but was taken by the dreaded terror group ISIS in 2014. And 3 years later, no one knows where he is. Anita is not alone in her grief. Families of 39 Indians wake up to unimaginable pain each day, their thoughts oscillating between hope and dread. Hope that their loved ones will come back now that Mosul has been liberated. Fear that the worst has already happened. A top Indian minister and former general visited Iraq in search of the 39 missing Indians.
After the declaration that Mosul has been liberated, the Ministry of External Affairs decided that we must send our people to find out the 39 Indians who were held captive by ISIS. We are hopeful that we will be able to find them, because in these last almost 2 years, we haven't had a negative input so far. So I'm hopeful that we will be able to find out.
The Indian government has repeatedly maintained all Indians are safe. But for these families, statements make little sense.
On the ground in Mosul, there's destruction and debris as far as the eye can see. How difficult will it be for Iraqi authorities and the government of India to find the missing? WION's correspondent Daniele Pagani takes stock.
The Islamic State does not militarily control the city of Mosul, but while the eastern part of the city is fastly getting back on track, the old city is not.
So this, behind me, is just one example of the level of destruction close to the old city, the western part of Mosul. So this is what the Iraqi government has to deal with now that the battle is more or less over. I say more or less because there are still sleeping cells perhaps within the city. IEDs needs to be cleared, booby traps, explosive that the Islamic State left before retreating and before getting defeated. It'll take a long time. So when we talk about what a city, how does a city looks like after a conflict, this is it.
The Iraqi army is restricting access. There are IEDs, booby traps, and snipers still hiding in the cities. And it is in western Mosul that the 39 Indians who disappeared were working. Mostly from Punjab, they were working for a Baghdad-based company which was building a stadium in a big residential complex.
Did you see these Indian workers working there at the stadium, sir?
نفس الملعب كانوا يشتغلون نعم الهنود وبعدين اختفوا فجأة. نعم.
And you know, they were 39 of them disappeared in 2014. Daesh kidnapped them. Have you seen them? Have you heard something about them?
لا أثناء الخطاب لا ما شفناهم، كانوا موجودين هم يشتغلون بس من فات داعش اختفوا هون أيام ما شفناهم بعدها.
Nobody knows where they are. Nobody knows if they're still alive, but their families are full of hope.
ਗੁਰਦੀਪ ਨੂੰ 4 ਸਾਲ ਹੋ ਗਏ ਗਿਆ ਨੂੰ ਘਰੋਂ ਗਏ 4 ਸਾਲ 9 ਮਹੀਨੇ ਕੰਮ ਰਹੇ ਉੱਥੇ ਠੀਕ ਠਾਕ ਰਹੇ ਆ ਫੋਨ ਆਉਂਦਾ ਰਿਹਾ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਠੀਕ ਠਾਕ ਆਂਗਾ ਤੇ 9 ਮਹੀਨੇ ਬਾਅਦ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਫਿਰ ਅਗਵਾ ਕਰ ਲਿਆ ਮਸੂਲ ਸ਼ਹਿਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਤੇ ਲਾਸਟ ਮੈਂ 15 ਜੂਨ ਨੂੰ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਫੋਨ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਆਇਆ ਸੀ ਗੁਰਦੀਪ ਦਾ ਬਾਅਦ ਥੋੜੀ ਜਿਹੀ ਬਾਤ ਹੋਈ ਹੈਲੋ ਹੋਏ ਤੇ ਬੋਲਿਆ ਵੀ ਮੰਮੀ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਦਾ ਖਿਆਲ ਰੱਖੋ.
Rescue operations in the area where they were last seen are very difficult. Even the civil defense, an organization which every day looks for survivors and dead civilians in the rubble, are now restricted.
هسه بلغنا من قائد عمليات قادمون نينوى فريق عبد الامير فريق ركن عبد الامير يرى الله بلغنا بانه يصير تريث بالعمل بهاي المناطق القديمه لانه الا يعني الجهد الهندسي يقوم بتطهير هاي المناطق من الالغام من العبوات اللي موجوده من الاحزمه الناسفه الموجوده وينطينا اشعار بالعمل بعد ما تطهر كل المناطق هذه.
I'm standing right now in front of the civil defense headquarters inside the city of Mosul. What do these people do? They collect all the corpses lying underneath the rubble in the city of Mosul every day, tens of corpses. People come here, they demand, they ask them to go and find their families. They have no news for their families. And the access to the old city of Mosul has been blocked because there are many improvised explosive devices and booby traps. Therefore it is too dangerous and people do not know if their relatives are still alive. This is one of the many post-conflict tragedies which is affecting the city of Mosul right now after the victory against the Islamic State.
A high-profile Indian delegation led by General V.K. Singh reached Erbil to see if after the liberation of Mosul it would be possible to go on the ground and look for the 39 missing Indians. A piece of Indian heart disappeared in Iraq. The road is full of obstacles. Thousands of civilians are believed to be buried underneath the city's rubble.
So this is one of the main roads in Mosul, and behind me we can see one example of the level of destruction of the city. So when we talk about the 39 Indians who got abducted from Mosul by the Islamic State in 2013, and we talk about how difficult it could possibly be to find them either dead or alive, this is where the security forces will need to search. Even removing the entire amount of rubble in the city will be very problematic. We obviously hope they are alive, but we are also afraid that they are no more. Perhaps they are still in Mosul, or perhaps they are somewhere either in Iraq or Syria. Daniele Pagani from Mosul for WION.
And Daniele Pagani is joining us this evening live from Mosul, I'm told. Also with us, Dr. Sriram Cholia, who is a professor and dean at the Jindal School of International Affairs, also the executive director of the Center for Global Governance and Policy. And we have with us Sanjay Kapoor, editor of Hard News magazine. Good evening and welcome to all of you. Daniele, we just saw the report filed by you earlier today. And given the amount of rubble that we see in the city of Mosul, it looks like this is going to be like looking for a needle in a haystack.
Absolutely, yes. I'm afraid that's the exact metaphor we could perhaps use. Of course, this is just one of the many problems. The first problem will be to exactly understand where they were exactly. We know that the last people who saw them working in a stadium which was being built in the western part of Mosul, which was today and yesterday inaccessible because it's still very dangerous. It's full of landmines, booby traps and IEDs. So they have been seen there. We do not know if the Islamic State sent them somewhere else, perhaps in Syria, to use them as forced laborers, because that happens. Many of the laborers who got kidnapped by the Islamic State were then used as, I would say, slaves to build their barricades, their buildings, their barracks, whatever the Islamic State needed. But yes, even looking for them, if they are indeed unfortunately dead and they are still in Mosul, looking for their bodies will be very difficult. As you have seen the old city, I've shown just a little bit of the old city, but that's pretty much the entire old city. It's unfortunately a pile of rubble.
Sanjay Kapoor, the government has always maintained that this is going to be one of their top priorities, and some reports also saying that they've got inputs from time to time about the whereabouts of these Indians and their condition. How much do we know?
You know, first of all, after the initial information that we got that 39 people have disappeared, it was a Palestinian leadership that provided the first indication that they may be alive, but they did not provide any proof of life. And after that, you know, there have been many attempts by Indian Foreign Office. It has been even attempted by the relatives of the families to find some evidence, but nothing has shown up till now. So I think one has to believe that it's very difficult to come out in these circumstances. If you've seen the rubble and if you've heard about the intense bombing that has taken place, especially in these parts, when Mr. Baghdadi, with all the support and all the protection that he had, reportedly has gone away, I find it difficult to believe that the Indian, laborers who were there, they could have survived because the reports that have appeared, there was one investigation which was conducted by an Indian magazine, and the reporter spoke with one or two survivors, one especially who came back, and he was very categorical that there is nothing to suggest that these people are alive. So I'm rather despondent. I'm not very sure whether we can expect any good news out of it. And also in these circumstances, when you have hundreds and thousands of people who have died, imagine just 10,000 Iraqi soldiers and people's militia died from October till now. And to be just worried about our people seems slightly out of sync with the general mood. So it's a tragedy which is unfolding in Mosul, and we have to be display certain kind of humanitarian values and to express solidarity with everybody who's there in Mosul rather than just worry about our own people.
Very well put. Dr. Chaulia, the government says it has taken up the search on war footing. How hopeful should the families be given the conflicting reports that we're getting?
Palki, time has passed since their abduction, and a lot of water has flown down the Euphrates and the Tigris. The conflict has evolved since our workers disappeared. So I think it would be a miracle to even find their remains. I'm sad to say this, but I think the point is well taken that it's a massive humanitarian disaster. The effort to overthrow and oust ISIL went on for several months and extended beyond expectations, and the resistance was very hard, and they did use a lot of hostages, civilians, as human shields against the incoming Iraqi forces and their international supporters. So I think it's fair to say that we will do our duty. Our extraterritorial responsibility lies towards making sure that whatever has happened to our citizens, the truth should be known. But it may be a wake rather than a welcome that awaits these villagers in Punjab, I'm afraid.
Unfortunately. Daniele, for the Iraqis, as we've discussed in detail yesterday as well, that there are many other challenges that the establishment is facing. Where does the search for these Indians figure in their list of priorities, if at all?
Well, I'll be very frank, and I will say that it figures in a very low position. It is obvious that there are perhaps thousands of corpses still buried underneath the amount of rubble in Mosul. Every day, the civil defense, the person I interviewed heads the civil defense inside Mosul every day at 7 a.m. in the morning. They go out and they fill trucks with corpses. It means we're talking about tens at best dead corpses a day, which are being found between the rubbles. Now they don't even have access to the old city anymore. The reconstruction is an enormous challenge. The reconstruction of the social fabric is an enormous challenge. Today, I met some of the women looking for their husbands in the rubbles at the civil defense. And what they said is that they want full revenge. And the sentiment of revenge is prominent all over the city of Mosul. And this is another problem. So I don't mean to say that the Iraqi government do not consider the life or the death of the 39 Indians important, but they have an enormous amount of problems, and putting it into perspective, I am afraid it means it's not on their priority list, at least not in their top priorities.
Right. Sanjay Kapoor, India has dispatched a minister. How much does that help? How much help and resource allocation can be expected from the Iraqis given the circumstances? Do you believe the government of India is doing everything that can be done to look for these Indians?
No, Indian government has done plenty. In fact, Madam Sushma Swaraj has been keeping the focus on the disappearance or the abduction of these people for quite a while. She's the one who raised hopes amongst the relatives that they may be alive. She has interacted with the Arab diplomats about the possibility of these people somehow coming out of, this war zone. But, you look at the way this entire place has been hammered into nothing. I mean, you just have rocks and rubble. It's absolutely impossible for unprotected people to survive, and they were people who would have been in the first line of being used as what you call a human wall or whatever you would like to use it. So I'm not very confident that much is going to happen. By sending a minister there, we are just expressing that our commitment to the families, because one of the things that this government has been telling time and again, and that they will travel an extra mile to protect our people, to get them back. And sending Mr. VK Singh, General VK Singh there is a manifestation. But I think it will be a major distraction for the Iraqis. They are at the moment in the middle of a war. They are in the middle of trying to ascertain how to heal the wounds which Mosul had started, because the entire sectarian poison which had been introduced into this war, especially the Islamic State, began with Mosul, and they had committed genocide of a certain kind. If you know about this Fiker massacre of these 1,300 or maybe 2,000 Iraqi recruits who were mostly Shia, they were picked out and they were shot and they were buried. So, you have these tragedies which are unfolding with every passing minute. And as your correspondent from Mosul has been saying that, you have families scurrying around looking for people. They don't know where their husbands have gone, where their children have gone. And I'm sure the civil defense and other people are at the moment trying to get a sense of how to deal with this kind of tragedy which has struck a major city of Iraq. So I think that it's all right to do this kind of symbolism, but nothing much is going to come out of it.
Right. Dr. Chaulia, notwithstanding your previous answer where you said that there is very little hope of them being alive, I still want to ask you this. When a minister is sent to another country in such circumstances, how do you go about a mission like this? Who are your informants? What do you do there? Where do you start?
Yeah, when one has to coordinate with the Ministry of the Interior and the Iraqi military. Those are the two pivotal actors, and of course the foreign ministry. And I'm pretty sure our embassy there has been, at this coordination effort for a while, anticipating the final defeat of ISIS from Mosul and this, search mission. So I think we have a fair amount of friends in the region. I know that in the past, before Mosul was liberated, we had been trying through various regional actors and players who have proxies in the war in Iraq to try and find them. The Iranians have their proxies. Qatar and Saudi had been also supporting some of these jihadist groups in the past. Turkey was critical. So I think we have made all the calls that mattered. And in some cases, some abductees were released for ransom and so on over the last few years since ISIS's rise. Since 2014, but we have had no luck with them. And you must also appreciate the venomous ideology of ISIS, and therefore it makes it harder for our chances, because first of all they treat non-Muslims and non-Sunnis as dhimmis or kafirs or infidels or apostates who have to be massacred or enslaved. And it was simple. I mean, they had no nuances there. And so I think our laborers must have met a horrible fate. But I hope not. But that sounds like the most plausible explanation for their complete silence, because they didn't even ask for ransom. You see, in some cases, these abductees, be they victims of Al-Qaeda remnants or of ISIS, were being traded for money or for prisoners. But since there was no such demand with or none of those horrific beheadings that ISIS used to do for some other prisoners, you recall there were Japanese and of course a number of Western prisoners who were paraded in front of camera and beheaded. Nothing like that happened. So I think our men have just disappeared and have had a quiet death. And it's a horrific thing to say, but we have to reconcile with it. We may be wanting to actually look for remains of the evidence, which itself, as our friends have been saying, is impossible possibly because of the extreme bombardment and the rubble to which the city has been reduced to. It's possible also that they've been moved out of Iraq, out of Mosul. And you remember, ISIS still controls some parts of Anbar province. There are towns like Talafar and Hawija where ISIS still reigns. And so it's, the only hope really is that if they have been enslaved and are working as doing menial labor, then they have been taken out of Mosul, which is, some solace.
Right, Daniele, I'm looking at the images that you sent, and you're in Erbil, let me correct myself, which is about 85 kilometers from Mosul, and you visited Mosul earlier today, the old city. I'm looking at countless bullet-ridden walls and images of destruction. I want you to tell our viewers a little more about what you saw. What do people say? Do they fear that sectarian violence or tension might flare up again?
What I saw is a devastated city. I don't have any other word to define it. The beginning of the old city, which is showing, and is what you were looking at, because the old city was closed today due to danger of IEDs and snipers still active in the area. It's completely devastated. And the inner part of the old city is even worse. This is because in the last 2 and 3 months, the number of airstrikes has increased at least by 50%. It means that more or less the double amount of bombs fell over Mosul. People tried to protect themselves by going inside the many basements that Mosul has, and perhaps many of them are still there, perhaps many of them are still alive. The sense, the feeling that I met when I talked to the several people that I met today is anxiety, majorly anxiety. We are talking about families who were able to talk with some of their relatives still trapped underneath the rubble 4 days ago. But then due to the lockdown, due to the shutdown of the Iraqi army and the absence of electricity in the western part of Mosul, they are not able to talk to them anymore, so they don't know if they are alive. And revenge is a sentiment which is everywhere. Today I spoke with some of the women at the civil defense and some of the men looking for their brothers, sisters, husbands, daughters and sons, kids. And all they said is, we want revenge against the Sunnis who did so. That lies the foundation of a very problematic possible sectarian conflicts in the years to come. And this is not good news, because this is the last thing that a city like Mosul, but a country like Iraq, for that matter, needs right now to rebuild a stable peace and become again an international actor and become again a reliable partner when it comes to business and investment and military cooperation.
Right, Daniele Pagani, thanks very much. Let me also thank Sanjay Kapoor and Dr. Cholia for joining us and for sharing their perspective with us. This is the Mosul of today, of July 2017. Daniele Pagani also visited this city last November when the war was very much on, and this is the report he'd filed then. Take a look.
The offensive to reconquer Mosul, the last stronghold of the Islamic State in Iraq, started 6 weeks back. The Iraqi army is now well inside the city, and the fight is very hard. It's a city war, street by street, house by house.
When the people flee their neighborhood, the procedure is that they have to reach a certain point, like the point where we are right now, where the Iraqi army, the counter-terrorism and the special forces take their IDs in their name in order to understand who's fleeing and who's not, and eventually to cross-check their names and to see if there are any individuals suspected to either belong or to have been an ISIS supporter.
Civilians keep fleeing their neighborhoods. Some of them have lost everything and will now be transferred to one of the many refugee camps set up for the emergency. We reach a field medical post to assess what is happening to the many civilians still living in the city. The structure is located in an abandoned house and with the basic equipment has to stabilize as many patients as possible. The medical wastage is burned outside the small field hospital.
كثير من الحالات المدنية تأتينا أطفال، شيوخ، كبار، حالات البتر، حالات الإصابات بالبطن، بالصدر، بالرأس. والله احنا قريبين جدا عن خط التماس. حاجة الماسة لقطاعاتنا تستوجب وجودنا بالخط الأمامي للإطمئنان على صحة مقاتلينا وللسيطرة على حالات الجروح الكبيرة والحالات الإصابات الكبيرة.
The Islamic State has placed many rudimental explosive devices all around the city. It just takes a false step to get caught in an explosion, which is exactly what happened to this man.
راحة معنا مرات يجينا حالة ساعة ب2 ساعة ب3 ساعة ب4 الصبح نقعد الصبح ساعة ب6 نبدأ يعني نجهز العسكريين ونبدأ بتناول الفطور بعدين نجي للمكان هذا اللي هو كل المعلوم لكل القطاعات فيخلونا جرحى علينا اللي جاي احنا نقوم بتغميدهم وبتعويضهم السوائل بالسيطرة على الحالة مالتهم معنويا وجسديا بعدين نحيلهم إلى النقطة الثانية اللي هي تحيلهم إلى مستشفى خرط أربيل.
The war against the Islamic State in Mosul, as all wars, makes no distinctions and civilians pay always the highest price. There are no intelligent bombs, no clever bullets. Everyone is a potential target, like Ahmed, 9 years old, who was just playing in his courtyard when a mortar exploded less than 3 meters from him.
Behind me there is the only field hospital right now active in the city of Mosul. All the people injured, civilians and soldiers, gather here for a first assessment. A handful of doctors decide if they need further treatments, and if they do need further treatments, they are transferred to the closest hospital, which is roughly 1.5 hours from here. Daniele Pagani and Martinaim for WION for Mosul.
Daniele Pagani continues to report from Mosul and Erbil on the aftermath of the war and the victory, as they're calling it, the liberation from the shackles of ISIS. So do catch those special reports, ground reports on WION. We're taking a break here on Gravitas. Still ahead on the show, the latest from Kashmir. A security agency's corner the plotters of the Amarnath Yatra attack, the world's stinging condemnation of Pakistan. Stay with us for more.